My name's Brandon and this is Cartoon Network Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Cartoon Network shows and retrospectively review them. Yes, I'm returning to the series that started it all, because we have a brand new Cartoon Network game that has just released. Ben 10 Power Trip is the latest entry into the numerous video game adaptations for the series. Obviously based on the reboot series, Ben 10 Power Trip was released on October 9 and is the first Ben 10 game since 2017. Speaking of that 2017 game, we actually have new developers in charge here. I thought Taurus Games did a really good job on Ben 10, but it was just far too short. However, they've been booted from the series for a new team. PHL Collective are the developers here, and they have quite an interesting history. They've created a Tom and Jerry game for CartoonNetwork.com, a game for Android TV, We Bare Bears and Ben 10 VR experiences, and Clusterpuck 99, which is the only game they've made for standard consoles or PC. I'm not too sure on the overall quality of their catalogue of games, but at a glance it really seems like developing a game such as Ben 10 Power Trip is brand new for this group. However, seeing they have some experience with the Ben 10 series is encouraging, as well as the overall fact that they seem to have a pretty strong relationship with Cartoon Network. The game is published by Outright Games, who have pretty much become the go-to publisher for this era of Cartoon Network games. They were the publisher for the first game too. In general, if you see a game based on a TV show being released in this day and age, it's probably being published by Outright Games. And they're also the ones who supplied me with a review copy of this game, putting this here for full disclosure and to be transparent with you guys. Ben 10 Power Trip has looked quite promising in the lead up to the release, but will it perfect the Ben 10 formula? Before I jump into the review, I have a big announcement. Do you want to win a copy of Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2? Well, if you enter my exclusive competition, you can go into the running for a PS4 copy of the game. All you need to do is head to my Twitter profile, follow me, and like my tweet promoting this video, and you'll go into the running. You've got until the 19th of October to enter, so make sure you get in before it's over. But now, on with the review.
Let's see how you do without the help of your ridiculous aliens!
What did you do?
Animation fans have really been spoiled this year when it comes to video games. We've already seen titles like the Battle for Bikini Bottom remake, Samurai Jack Battle Through Time, and Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2. Next on the agenda is Ben 10 Power Trip. The premise for this game is that Ben, Gwen, and Grandpa Max have landed in Europe to enjoy a nice peaceful vacation, but almost immediately they encounter classic Ben 10 villain Hex. Using a set of magical crystals, Hex unleashes a bunch of powers that mess with Ben's Omnitrix. This isn't the first time we've encountered Hex in a video game, most notably he was the star of The Rise of Hex. Overall, the narrative here is pretty uninteresting. The narrative idea of Ben stumbling upon a villain and losing access to all of his aliens has been done in seemingly every Ben 10 game. You've also got Kevin being shoehorned into the plot. He literally only exists here to allow for co-op play. Now, the co-op is actually kind of a cool premise, as the person playing as Kevin gets all of his unique versions of the aliens. However, it's kind of weird that he just shows up out of the blue at the start, only to never be heard from again if you're playing in single player. Also, what the hell happened to his neck during his introductory cutscene? Kevin, my boy, are you okay? Something you'll quickly notice in this game is that the characters' accents are all over the place. This game takes place in a European town, which is kind of implied to be Germany, but the accents of random NPCs are so bizarre. A good example is this park ranger who gives you a bunch of missions at the start. His accent is a bizarre mishmash of British, Australian, and New Zealand.
You did it, Ben! Well, I shouldn't have doubted you. Maybe you could look into this call I just received. There's some rogue wildlife harassing parkgoers in the picnic area.
If you followed my Cartoon Network video game history series, you'll remember that 90% of the Ben 10 games follow the same formula. Almost all of them were some sort of linear, classic beat-em-up game, rarely straying from this formula. Well, Ben 10 Power Trip completely does away with that. It's 2020 now, so damn near every game has to be open world. PHL Collective decided this should apply to Ben 10 too. There have been a few open world style games from Cartoon Network previously, like Powerpuff Girls Relish Rampage or Adventure Time Pirates of the Enchiridion, but none of them have taken it to this degree. Ben 10 Power Trip is doing its best to emulate the style of open world game you'd see from AAA developers today. And at first glance, it's rather impressive. The world here is pretty damn expansive, covering 3 separate areas. It's one thing to have a big open world, but it's much more important to fill that world with things to do. This is where it becomes extremely telling that this isn't a AAA game. The world is so empty here. It really reminds me of when games from the PS2 era would do gigantic environments, but because of limitations, they couldn't really fill them in an interesting way. Just look at this big-ass city. It's supposed to be a bustling metropolitan hub, but instead it's a ghost town that's sparsely populated and devoid of anything happening. Featuring a giant environment to explore, you might naturally be thinking, Brandon, how does little old Ben Tennyson traverse such a large world? On his scooter, bitch! Ben's on his way to steal your girl. Whenever you're playing as Ben, you have the option to bring out a scooter by pressing R2, offering a much faster way of getting around. With nostalgia for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater at an all-time high, they should have scrapped the open world concept and instead made Ben Tennyson Pro Scooter. All jokes aside, implementing this method of transport is really cool. Giving you a faster way to travel makes exploring so much easier, and it's the perfect gameplay addition to get you switching back to Ben. Usually in Ben 10 games, you barely ever see him outside of his alien forms, as there's literally no reason for you to be a regular human. In Power Trip, this changes because Ben is the best form for travelling. However, this doesn't last. Eventually you unlock Accelerate, and once that happens, you'll never change to Ben again. Additionally, there's a fast travel system that uses the Rust Bucket. It's nice to have, but I found that I didn't really use it because of how quick Accelerate is. I was more than happy to run to my next objective, encountering various random things on my way. When you're zipping around areas, you'll discover coins littered about. They also drop when you do things like beat enemies or complete missions. These coins allow you to purchase various goods from the shops around the world. You can purchase power-up bars, which give you a number of boosts to your abilities in combat for a limited time, while also purchasing upgrades or maps to show you where the game's collectibles are. The power-up items are a nice idea, but why did the developers think it was smart to have you pause the game and go into your inventory every time you want to use one? It's too clunky, and most of the time I forgot they even existed. And as I alluded to, like a true open world game, there's a bunch of random trinkets to collect. In fact, this game literally refers to them as trinkets. You've got plenty of side missions to do too, alongside combat challenges. It's very clearly inspired by many of the biggest games of the last 2 generations. Unfortunately, I get the feeling that PHL Collective had a great idea for the game, but no idea how to execute it. On the surface, a Ben 10 open world game sounds incredible, but the content within that setting massively falls flat. For the majority of the 5 or so hours you'll spend here, most of the gameplay centers around Ben doing fetch quests or other menial tasks. I was genuinely shocked by how little of a part combat plays here. Yeah, you do encounter enemies, but until the very end of the game, it seriously feels like a minor part. You're just constantly doing the same types of missions over and over again. It's always some variation of go here and collect X amount of things. It's ridiculously boring and just reeks of the developers being unsure how to actually make an open world Ben 10 game work. After you complete all of the main story missions in one area, you'll be taken to a boss battle. Every single boss battle in this game is identical, and they're all extremely dull. The bosses themselves are dull in design, the way you take them down is dull, and the fact that they're all the same is unfathomably boring. Even the final boss battle with Hex tweaks the formula only slightly. I will admit though, some of the weird non-combat missions gave me some serious unintentional laughs. Like this beard growing minigame. What on earth was this? You have to grow the beards of these lumberjacks using a serum, but you don't even have to fully grow their beards. As a result, I gave them disgusting patchy beards, and then when the game transitioned back to a cutscene, they all had their bizarre new beards on. It was hilarious. And this section where the lumberjacks are straight up vibing was sick too. The lumberjacks might actually be the best part of Power Trip. Even though it's kind of downplayed by the main story missions, let's take a deeper look at the combat here. If you've played a Ben 10 game before, you won't be too unfamiliar with how it all controls. Square is a light attack, triangle is a heavy attack, and combinations of these can be strung together to pull off stronger combo moves. This setup is tradition at this point. You can also dodge roll with circle, but in my experience, it's not something you'll bother with often. To change aliens, you can pull up a select wheel with L1 or R1 as you slowly recollect Ben's aliens. When I say slowly, I really mean it. It took me roughly 2 hours to gain access to an alien other than Heat Blast. Getting your aliens back happens at set points during the story. A mysterious portal will open up in front of Ben, and by going into it and completing a tutorial, you'll unlock that new alien. As you can see, there are only 6 aliens in this game. Come on guys, really? Being an open world, this was the perfect chance to pack in as many aliens as possible. While the roster is annoying, I was pretty happy with how all of the aliens controlled. Another Ben 10 game tradition is each alien having a specific environmental ability, and Power Trip is no exception. All of these abilities are required to be used constantly throughout the main story, as well as if you want to explore the overall world. It's a great way to get you to play as different characters. I wouldn't have played as Heat Blast as much if he wasn't the only alien to double jump, or Wrath because he's the only character that can parkour his way up walls. In general, I found the combat to be pretty fluid. It flows really nicely, and while it doesn't have any sort of lock-on, I did like the way I could transition from enemy to enemy with ease. It's really fluid and is definitely in the upper echelon of Ben 10 games. Adding to that fluidity is the ability to assign favourite aliens to the directional pad. This allows you to keep the aliens you use most literally one button press away, which I absolutely loved. There's nothing like seeing a particular type of enemy and switching instantly to the alien best suited to bring it down. And that convenience extends to running around the environment too. Switching on the fly felt perfect. In the past, alien transformations have often ruined the flow of things, so a big thumbs up here from me. One thing that did frustrate me is that you're forced to have Ben take up one of these favourite spots at all times. By the time you get Accelerate, there's no reason to use Ben, so allowing me to add a different character there would have been handy. With only 6 aliens to choose, it was crucial to at least make them feel unique, and thankfully PHL nailed this. They all feel different in combat thanks to their unique moves and abilities, but it's far from perfect. This game ties the upgrade system to Ben. At certain story points, or by finding and purchasing them, you'll unlock upgrade points. These can be spent on your attack power, defense, or the rate at which you achieve critical hits. By tying this to Ben, all of your aliens remain at the same ability level. As far as I could tell, every alien dished out the exact same amount of damage, which ended up making them feel samey. Because of this, I relied a lot on Accelerate because he can deliver attacks the quickest, while not having any noticeable limits on how powerful they are. And then there's the biggest issue. Ben 10 Power Trip is too easy. The game is obviously aimed at young kids, and because there's no difficulty selection, I breezed through the combat. I didn't die a single time. On top of that, there are like 4 unique enemy types, so combat quickly becomes dull and run-of-the-mill, despite it not being featured too heavily. Graphically, Ben 10 Power Trip is a mixed bag. I think the cutscenes look about the same as the previous Ben 10 game, while the visuals during gameplay are serviceable. In fact, they're pretty good considering this is a budget title that is also open world. When you have a linear game, like the original Ben 10 reboot game, you can pour more resources into the visuals as everything is much smaller in scope. Because Power Trip goes for a larger world, it was never going to look stunning or anything. I thought it was such a nice, colourful and vibrant game too. All the colours pop here. But then there are moments where things are spectacularly low budget. Most notably, many of the random civilian characters are so low quality they feel ripped from a PS2 game. Even worse is that it has a bunch of technical issues. The frame rate absolutely chugs going through lots of areas. I've never been an FPS snob, but even for me this was off-putting. Maybe there's a day one release patch coming to iron all this out, but I haven't been informed of that, so I'd say it's unlikely. I played on the PS4, so I can only imagine how badly this will chug on the Switch. Don't be surprised if there's minor backlash regarding that version. At one point the game completely spazzed out and just infinitely loaded too, but thankfully that was the only major game-breaking bug. It's really unfortunate that Power Trip can't shake off the limitations of being low budget. I was trying to temper my expectations, but just look at some of these sequences. This mission where I'm chasing Hex is hilariously awkward, accompanied by the shoddy frame rate. Similarly, look at how embarrassing this truck chasing segment is. Whenever I started to get into a groove and really enjoy Power Trip, I was always immediately brought back to reality with clunkiness, poor design, or something that would make me unintentionally laugh out loud. To me, it feels like PHL bit off more than they could chew with this game. It's one thing to have an ambitious, cool idea, but it's a whole other thing to successfully pull it off.
You know what I always say? It's hero time.
Ben 10 Galactic Racing aside, I think Power Trip is the most unique Ben 10 game I've played. Most games in the series have been some variation of Protector of Earth on the PS2. While the execution isn't the best, it's really refreshing to see a new take. It gets points just purely for not being the 10 billionth beat 'em up. There are a bunch of small nuggets of good ideas, but Power Trip is mostly a squandered opportunity. It took serious balls to try and make a proper open world game, but seeing the end result, I may have just preferred to get a genuine sequel to the 2017 reboot game. Should you buy it? Not for full price, unless you're a die-hard Ben 10 fan. My recommendation is to wait until it's heavily discounted and then jump in. With a lower price tag, you might not be as put off by the numerous issues. And with that, we've officially covered all of the Cartoon Network games again. I really wonder what the future of this series is. I'm sure Ben 10 will keep chugging along, but what will be the next Cartoon Network show to get its own video game? Next time, it's back to Nickelodeon video game history as we're reviewing yet another Ren and Stimpy game. It was nice to get away from that duo for a brief moment, but in my next video we'll be seeing if VDITS is any good.